Posso andare? Good morning to everyone, and welcome to Politecnico di Milano. We are here today for an event that is connected with Laurea ad Honorem that we awarded yesterday to Yasmeen Lari, who is with us also today. And we are here for presenting and discussing about the book Yasmeen Lari, an Architect. This book has been conceived in occasion of the honoris causa, and the authors are four colleagues, Fabrizia Berlingeri, Emilia Corradi, Cassandra Cozza, and Imma Forino. I want also to mention Angela Arnone, who translated in English our texts in a fantastic way. And I want also to thank a lot Arianna Scaioli for the editing and some parts of apparatus of the book. This is also the moment to thank a lot about the exhibition that we did now at the Labora Model Lab of Politecnico di Milano for the work that our students did together with Cassandra Cozza, that I really thank a lot for all the work that she did, and Fabrizia Berlingeri, Emilia Corradi, and Imma Forino, and with the responsible of the Labora, Professor Cecilia Bolognesi, Renato Aiminio, Francesco Montaldo, and the tutors, Simone Ballin, Filippo Oppimitti, Sara Anna Sapona, Arianna Scarioli, Andrea Soggia, and our students that worked hard in an intensive program of a workshop during the months of July, September, October. Tassim Abdallah, Futaba Amano, Claudia Caccini, Usha Dorudian, Ahmed Kayagil, Elahe Nezafat, Giovanni Ossorio, Francesca Pauletti, Ilaria Pellegrini, Michaela Podestà, Federica Ronzitti, Masha Salek, Benedetta Tomasina, Gui Qiang Yao, Siman Zhang, Yao Zhang, Yue Zong. And if you go out, you could see some models that are exported outside the Labora of the prototypes of the emergency architecture by Yasmeen Lari. And I have to thank the supporter of the workshop and of the initiative, Italbu, Lezzilli, and Fausto Zazzara. And I want then to thank a lot Oya Atalay Frank, who is the Dean of the Winterthur School of Architecture and President of the European Association for Architectural Education, and Fulvio Irace, now Emeritus Professor since few days. Congratulations, Fulvio. In History of Architecture, he teaches a lot in Politecnico di Milano, in the School of Architecture and School of Design, and now in the School of Architecture, Urban Planning, Construction, Engineering, and that are here for discussing about the book with Yasmeen Lari and with the authors. So now I give the floor to Oya Atalay. Thanks, Oya. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilaria. This is a great pleasure, and it's a great honor to sit next to you, Yasmeen Lari, and be among all of you. I think we have an amazing book. It's a book which is done very modestly, and it is a treasure. What it has in these pages, what you can read, but what you can see is something unique of a life work. It's a lot of work, and it's an incredible engagement socially and ecologically, which we are actually, in our hands, we're holding as documentation. And it has an incredible future, this kind of approach to architecture and living in the society. Mel, I would like to ask, actually, on behalf of the authors, to start with the Cassandra Kotze, to give us a very small history of this book. What is it all about, and how it came really into being?
Thank you, Hoya. And, okay, it works. Let's say that the four of us, we were together in the board that was selecting and organizing the profile for the main selection of the Honoris Causa. And we start working together, and we were very touched by all the figures, but especially of working and studying a little bit more. So when there was the response that the chosen one was Yasmeen, talking with our colleagues, and Ima Forino said, but she really worth a book that is comprehensive of everything, because we realized that you have 3 or 4 or 5 different careers, and you are always renovating with and updating your work with and it was very hard to gather all the informations together. That's why we decided, okay, but we realized it wasn't so easy, so everyone is expert of a field, and like investigators, they were starting collecting stuff, and that's how it came that we realized, let's say, 3 main fields that are one on the profession that was the first Yasmeen, then all the conservation and the heritage work that's strongly connected also with the third of the Basa, and there also a little start of the tutoring that was starting when we wrote the book. And then a big effort to put the timeline and to collect. We really tried to give an idea of the richness and the importance that's crucial also for the new European Bauhaus topics, and for something that now we will have to deal with also in Europe and Milan due to climate change and so on. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You have mentioned the fields in which you were concentrated. I think this gives a very nice way to ask my colleague to maybe start on the question of the heritage. I think you would like to say a few words and pose some questions.
Yes, sure. Well, first of all, let me thank you, Lari and Doya, to have invited me to attend the event today. And of course, the best welcome to our distinguished guest, Yasmeen Lari. I'm very pleased to meet you personally, because Yasmeen has been told before, and as you can see through the pages of the book, somehow, without exaggerating, we can say that she's kind of a legend, because it's I mean, the book is a sort of movie somehow, with still frames movie to the pictures, which focus on, let's say, something more than half a century of a career, starting from the graduation in 1964 in Oxford, in England. So, you know, of course, the historiography has rather focused all kind of characters that have been linked during the second half of the last century, European Western culture, through also the managing presence of famous architects such as Louis Kahn or Le Corbusier and so on, with the Eastern countries. So we know something about that, and some parts of that, it's also somehow readable, visible through the beginnings of some of the buildings that Yasmeen Lari, with her practicing office, was capable of doing in her own country. but which I found, I was talking before with Doya, what I found most astonishing and very much interesting, especially from the vantage point of our school, which has been one of the first since the, I would say, the 80s to focus on the relationships, the active relationships between restoration, the restoration process, and the conservative movements, either from traditional or modern architecture, the so-called restauro del moderno, which I think I can surely state it was launched here by some of our masters and colleagues from Marco Dezzi Bardeschi, who unfortunately is not anymore among us. So the school, I would say, was really in Italy and maybe in Europe one of the forerunner in, let's say, fixing its didactic and operating targets around the issue of what is restoration, what do we mean with the word conservation, which has revealed to be one of the main issues of our days, especially when we talk so much, and maybe not always with a certain kind of reason, about recycling, for instance, the concept of reuse and of recycling, the issue of resilience, the issue of the invading technology, when the technology pretends to be sustainable, and at sometimes it has a sort of fault of pride, as I would call it, in saying that we should use sustainable technology for a better working of the old buildings, which I think is always a sort of a rape somehow. I'm very much in a sort of indignation because one of the best buildings by Joe Ponti, and we are in one of most famous examples of Joe Ponti architecture from the mid-50s. So this building has been, let's say, in brackets, restored, which means it's been completely stripped out. All the original materials has been completely substituted by modern materials in order to make Ponti work better. Now, can we imagine that an architect can improve the quality of Ponti? It's like saying that if we want to improve the Botticelli painting, for instance, the Venus by Botticelli, we should call an influencer to stand and make a selfie with Botticelli in the background because she improves the quality, improves the audience. So, I mean, we are very sensitive about this issue of preservation. And so it's very clear reading the book and going through the career of Yasmeen and her husband that at a certain point of their career, they felt the need to turn their activity, the intensity of their efforts, either theoretical and, of course, practical efforts, on the necessity of restoring buildings as an act of witnessing the heritage, which is not only a material heritage, which means a material made of buildings, of artifacts, but through the building, while you maintain the integrity of and the active presence of the building in the society, you are restoring somehow and preserving the continuity of an ideal, which is a way of living, a way of cultivating our own differences. In the global society where everything seems to be destined to be the same in every part of the world. Now we have seen with the lockdown, the pandemic, we have discovered the sense of specific place when we cannot move. We have discovered the feeling and the need for a more intense sense of community, the act of sharing spaces. So we now are in the position, Yasmeen, to understand the importance of the heritage, of preserving the heritage, not just for an architectural purpose, an aesthetic purpose, and for me that would be enough, I would say, but more than that, for preserving the presence of the life and the tradition of the people, which it would be really vain and rather insane to think that we can disperse. So I don't want to be too long, so maybe I posed too many questions to you, but if you could give us a sort of key of explaining your position.
Okay. Hard question to answer. I will try my best. You know, I feel that sometimes we treat heritage in isolation and somehow keep it in a very sacrosanct position where it's something that we should just view and not really be involved in. This happens in my country particularly, where we have very high kind of expertise of people coming in and basically getting again, you know, artisans or masons who will come and do the work, and then they all finish and they go away. And it doesn't touch the lives of the people who are around them, because the people who are around them are non-literate, they are poor, and they really don't feel that the heritage that they have in the midst of them is doing anything, is of any value to them, because they get no benefit out of it. So my whole feeling is, and I've been very fortunate in working at some wonderful World Heritage sites, such as Lahore Fort, and then of course at Makli, which I showed a little bit of, which is the you know, necropolis. And there are lots of people around, but they have nothing to do with them, because only tourists will come and have a look at it, and the poor people who are there don't even know the value of it, because they've never been involved in that work. And I feel that that's very wrong in a country like mine, where unless the public itself and people themselves start taking care of it, it's no good. It's not doing anything for them. So I've been very, again, fortunate in being able to get into the communities who are really like beggars, a lot of them, and persuading them and training them to be able to work on these sites also. So involving the locals more than just expertise brought from outside. And again, because we have some living traditions, there are crafts that are wonderful in my country, but they're dying because they are only done for the elite. And I felt that I need to take it into the villages, to everybody, to be able to understand the amazing richness that exists in my country. And so we are working with these beggar communities to teach them how to make kashi, which is the glazed tile, or how to make terracotta, which is an ancient form, which is not, it is still there, but it's very debased. And suddenly everybody wants to learn, and poor people who had nothing to do with it ever are doing it. So I feel that's a better way of protecting heritage, rather than just conserving it as a finite entity and not really has nothing to do with the people themselves. So it is a very different scenario that I have in my country than yours, and I think we have to have a totally different approach of how we deal with our heritage. That's, yeah. So.
Yes, I would say, Yasmeen, not all that different, because while you were speaking about this concept of the expertise and the beggars and how we should share, I was, in my mind, was reminding a very recent experience. I've been in Palermo 2 months ago to see a new contemporary art foundation called the Palazzo Butera, which is the restoration of a very huge, even immense Baroque palace in the city of Palermo, which is not completely Pakistan, but it's very close somehow in the historical center, because we have beggars there and we have, you know, some very disputable living conditions. Now, the palace has been beautifully restored. Actually, it's really, it was an amazing surprise, because it was nearly in ruin before. And one of the things in which the architect Giovanni Cappellini insisted that he thought was really worthwhile too, was the fact that it was made be possible the work of restoration through the let's say the training of young and not and even older generation of craftsmen who had completely disappeared from the Sicily, and which were really, I mean, necessary because you had to understand exactly, you know, how to restore marbles, how to restore stuccos, how to make, you know, all kind of things, even the ceramic tiles, for instance. So, in a certain sense, the art of restoring was not just a matter of a specialism, as you say, as expertise, but was a sort of constitution of a community, the community of workers who were very proud of their works. They even were surprised of being able of doing such beautiful things. So I think this is really a civil act, an act of civil action that I mean is not only typical of your country, but we should learn in our country as well, because the world is like this, you know. It's a series of spots somehow, no? When you see there are islands of very intense welfare, and then just one near the other, there is some sort of gray or even black zones. So for a better and more equal society, we can use this act and our skill as architects to promote civil conscience.
But this is exactly where your work is unique, because it's not only the discipline of conservation, heritage, and Baukultur. What you're doing is combining the heritage management with humanitarian assistance. This is unique. I mean, it's also not about continuation of traditions, building traditions, craftsmanship. In the moment, with your spirit of volunteerism and commitment to causes, you're building a completely different future for the communities. So this linking of heritage to innovate social and ecologically led initiatives is something that's not often to find. And in that, not only that you are combining high heritage, let's put it a little bit in a polemic way, with vernacular architecture, you're enabling people who are completely actually separated from this kind of richness, and you're empowering them. Can you tell about this aspect a little bit more, and how you see what it means for the future?
Well, you see, as you know, I started humanitarian work very late in my age, if you like. I was already, I think, about 65 or something, or 64, when I started work with earthquake victims and, you know, whatever happened there. And that led me to really try to understand what was available around, which I could use for people who could then do these things themselves also, because I very much believe that we should not make people dependent, especially the poor people, because they're already very down and out. And the more you can lift them up by using their skills or making them feel that they can be empowered, that they can control things, the better it is. And so, of course, in the earthquake area, everything was gone, right? 80,000 people lost lives, I mentioned yesterday. 400,000 families were entirely displaced. Never had it in Pakistan with such a major disaster. I think maybe even in the world, there were very few of those. And women were completely left behind. Women were just nowhere on the scene. They were hidden away in their houses because it's mountainous area and so on. And so I started to work with them, and I wanted to know about, I'm always interested in craft, because I think that's so important for us. And I found they do this very nice bead work. I found them, you know, little bits that were left somehow that they had salvaged. And so we started a whole program of working with beads. And that's how I learned that women can really, against all odds, that they can fight it and they are able to really overcome things just by that. And so it was the bead products that everybody started to make, and we told them how could they start sort of marketing it, and that's where men came in. because we discussed this about what happens to men when this happens. And women were making these at home because they're not allowed to go out and so on, and that's perfectly okay. But the men were the ones who would be getting the beads from the market or selling them. So it became a win-win situation. They all, I mean, the fathers were there, they became so proud of their daughters or husband even started, and there was less beating in the house and less violence that we heard. So suddenly, you know, it opened up for me that craft and this kind of development with understanding what people had can lead to better living conditions also and better society. But women were the key factor there. And this is why always when I work, they're the ones that are in the forefront. And I think heritage and crafts and everything go a long way to, you know, we talk about eradication of poverty, we talk about all kinds of things, but these are the little objects that they make, which they always did. I mean, crafts was always part of a, you know, this whole mass of people. It was never high society that was really interested in that kind of craft. And that's what I want. I want everybody to be able to make them and to use them for their own, for the beautification of their own homes, and not just to sell abroad, because then it becomes very expensive with all the middle people. So we have to take all these, you know, somehow take it to the people always. And that's where it starts making sense. So it's all kind of a learning experience, if you like. I've just, you know, learned a lot through this process. But I think we have to have faith in people, whether they are poor or downtrodden or whatever. You have to have faith in them.
Yes, I mean, it's very moving, this statement. We have to have faith in people because, I mean, it rarely happens, or it scarcely happens to have faith in people. We have fear of the people, maybe, but we do not have faith. And so this is very interesting, and I would say also it's very actual. Now, yes, when you were talking about building for tours, yes, there is another thing that happened to come in my mind, and was the reference to Hassan Fathy. You remember his famous book, Building with People, not building for people, but building with people, which somehow was inaugurating between the 50s and the 60s a new intellectual movement and also a new way of conceiving the art of architecture, which was not just the land of the specialists, of the technicians, but it was a way of sharing knowledge, but also passion. And then here again, I was also thinking, but I was remembering when I was a student of architecture in this school, and I was told by our professors of restoration about the figure of John Ruskin, the great artist, novelist, and of course art critic, John Ruskin, the English John Ruskin. When he wrote The Stone of Venice, or The Seven Lamps of Architecture, when it's more moving and more interesting books, it's very interesting that he was his blame for Renaissance art, which he likened to the Victorian pre-capitalistic attitude. There is a master who dictates the iconography and the technology, and then there are the people from the atelier, from the bottega, who really make the thing. And then he said, oh, the medieval cathedral, the Palazzo Ducale, where you see all kind of figurative features from sculpture to decoration. Some of them would be considered awful from an aesthetic point of view, but the more awful they are, the more they are sincere, because they are the genuine expression of something which comes from the art. So I think that, I mean, we can trace a very long line which appears and disappears during the times. So we are not alone, let's say, somehow. We are not completely left to ourselves. And I think that we have to enforce this kind of attitude and tradition, which we are completely losing under the pressure of technology, of media, who is reducing architecture to just a sort of image maker, no? A sort of the architect is like the Wizard of Oz who makes extravagant things. And so we have to get back with our feet on the ground, literally on the ground, not only metaphorical. And I think that your work is one of the best expression of this. So we are really very glad that our students can get in touch with your works also through this beautiful book, which is a really keen reconstruction of some of the most relevant steps. So coming back, okay, I always speak too much. It's sorry about that, but the question, Hassan Fathy, yes, what is your relationship, if there is any?
Well, first of all, I think, I think you touched a very sore point as far as I'm concerned, which is how an architect actually behaves, or how we were trained. I was trained too to be a prima donna, right? All of us were. And I think that's the worst thing we can do today. Maybe it was okay for that time. But today, this is not what the world needs. The prima donna, as far as I'm concerned, is out now. And I think that's why I consider Hassan Bey as a great visionary. Because I think so long ago, when none of us were even thinking about it, he was thinking of the people. How do you build with people, as you said, Yeah. Housing for the poor. Now, who had ever heard that architects could do housing for the poor, But it's taken so long, and we still don't understand that we have to work with the poor. That is where the majority is. And in the morning, we had a very interesting discussion, and I were talking about this, that, somehow the world that has changed and the whole environmental challenge that we have today, and it really relates to the majority, which, as far as I'm concerned, really is 99%, in my country. Yeah. Because we don't care. I don't care about the 1%. I've done enough for them, and I don't want to do any more of that, And that's the thing now, that I think architects have to find the ways. And, one thing that I don't know whether they are not learning in institutions, or whether people are not thinking, their responsibility is to society, not to themselves or to the powerful and the rich. Finally, architects are the ones who shape everything. They shape the environment. And if they shape the environment, they can influence how people are behaving or thinking. And so people like Hassan Fathy should be, yesterday I think there were very few who knew Hassan Fathy, yesterday when I said how many. And I think we need to study him much more. I had the good fortune of meeting him, actually, I have to tell you. And he called me his daughter. It was a long time ago, in the late 70s, at one of the Aga Khan, the first Aga Khan group meeting that was ever held. And I don't know how, I was quite young at the time. I was picked up out of God knows where, and I was taken. And then Hassan Bey and I discussed a lot. We became somehow very close, and I did not know his work before that, but in the 70s I tried to build in mud as well at that time. So I think we need to be rethinking the profession of architecture in today's world. We've got to see how we can now relate to the challenges that are there now, which I tried to mention yesterday. So I think it's a new world as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very old. So the young people have to now take it over and carry it on, yeah. So, right, yes.
Well, you are, of course, telling us to be ethical. You're telling us that we have to be, all of us, young and middle, old and old, all of us have to be socially responsible citizens. And that requires a lot of pulling yourself back and being in the service of a community, or to understand what that means. Interestingly, you also mentioned that Vitruvius is very important for you. Hassan Fathy and Vitruv, two names you have mentioned also in your lecture yesterday and also in the book. So maybe you could also tell us a little bit, what is the meaning of Vitruv for you?
Well, I'd, of course, read him a long time ago when I was studying in England, and had not really gone through his work ever since then, so I really had more or less forgotten. And then as I started to work more and more with Lime particularly, so I went through his books, and, it's amazing what he talks about and how he does it. But, he says some very interesting things, as I said yesterday, that, somehow if you use these four, if you are conscious of the four elements, then you know that how the alchemy that happens with these materials, that's what makes something. and somehow that you learn about, how nature works, how you can have kind of, democratic norms in building. And so that was quite an eye-opener when I, read him again. And so that was something. And also, of course, with Hassan Bey, I just feel that what he has said and what he did so many years ago, this was last century, almost 100 years ago now, 2030s, here we're talking of, right? It's such a long time ago. And he could foresee the future when none of us could, or none of us thought we could, so we never did actually. So I think these are the old masters, and as I call them my two gurus, as I said yesterday, and I try to follow them. And I think it's very good to have gurus in your life. I think it helps you to see the direction and always, as you said, keep you on the right path, because that right path is important for all of us, because we are not here just for ourselves. We are here, basically to help others also. And so we need to follow certain principles, and we have to believe in something, not just in yourself, right? Yes.
Absolutely. On the other hand, of course, the role of the architect has to be redefined, as you said. At the same time, most of the building activity which is taking place is not the production of the architects. It's the developers or consultants. And so we have a complete big mass of building activity which doesn't go through the hands of the architects. And your approach to enable actually the citizens, the poor, to give some certain capacity and empowerment is in a very different context to be thought of and also to be developed further. I mean, I don't know how much we could bring such systems to our context, because everything is also very much about the context. Yes. Pakistan, you have 200 million or even more, the population. I think you're like the 5th largest country, and you're saying 99% is poor. So we are dealing with a completely different scale of issues and challenges. That brings me to the question of the future of the cities, because you have also very clear ideas about bringing some vernacular elements, low-tech, ecologically friendly building, and possible without big investments. Can you tell us about how you want to integrate, develop the morphological aspects, the low-tech aspects? How you see the future of the cities, which are very responsible of the climate problems as well?
First of all, thank you for these questions. I've reflected quite a lot on what we need to do, really. But first, I think, most importantly, I think the architect has abdicated his or her position in society. We are so driven by commissions and who will appoint us, and only then we'll deliver, that I don't think we are thinking that there are other ways of also reaching out to people. And I think it's possible. And especially, I think, in this university where I find just so much potential and optimism and different ways of doing things, that maybe we should be now empowering our young people when they graduate, that they can go out into communities and offer their services rather than waiting for a commission. Because everywhere, whether it's Europe or America or countries like mine, communities need a lot of help in design. You won't believe it, but they do actually. And I think the young kids can go out there and say, okay, we are prepared to do it, form a little kind of a group and offer their professional services and charge their fees. Because everybody is willing to pay a little bit for a good facility or convenience. I think somehow we need to change the way that architects actually operate, And if you could do that, then I think there'll be enough work for everybody. Otherwise, I'm afraid things are going to be very tough. I'm sorry to say this, but COVID-19 and everywhere else, economic conditions are really poor. And how many multinationals will build these iconic structures, I don't know. So, we have to be careful. Now, coming to the second point of your, what we do with urbanism, in my old towns, and I showed some slides yesterday, there is this really, high density, low rise kind of building activity rather than very tall structures. And of course, the more you have pedestrian enclaves rather than many cars, then you are also saving on a lot of space. And more vegetation and more greenery. Of course, with COVID, more open spaces is what everybody needs. So in Karachi, I have this dream, and I've only done one segment, but there I can do more, I think, which is that the streets should now become our really the activity areas. So everything should happen on the streets, which means that you can, first of all, stop any concrete. So pavers should all be natural materials, or I use terracotta because now my women are producing this fantastic, terracotta cowls and so on. And this can be taught to everybody. And then lots of greens, and I was discussing this morning with Lari and so on as well about Miyawaki forest. So I'm trying to put in lots of forests in the middle of the street. And that is cleaning the air so well. Because we've got to now create a healthy environment for everybody. Whether you live in a palace or whether you live in a hovel, COVID attacks everybody. There is no safety. So every place for us has to be clean now. No pollution. We all deserve it. I think it's a right for all of us. So you should come to Karachi. There's a video that's been made which has become viral because nobody believes it's Karachi because it's so clean. And this is the problem in cities like ours, and where it's terrible what's going on. So I think the future is I'm quite optimistic if we do the right way. And if we do both, as I keep on saying, social and ecological justice, you can't do one without the other. So if you do both, then it will be a win-win situation, I think.
I think it's very interesting what you're saying because it poses a question, it poses to all of us a question. We have always believed for centuries that, let's say, the so-called third world or the rising country should learn from the more, let's say, wealthy countries, which means Western countries, whether in Europe or in the States. So they had to learn from us how to develop new strategies of building cities, of technologies to involve in architecture. And I think that now at the actual point of our civilization, we are in the condition, maybe an happy condition, to understand and to learn that we have to learn from the other countries, that it's the way, the reverse way somehow. We should dismiss our rather, let's say, proud and contempt-like attitude, to see that everything has to be concentrated on technology, on the intensity of technology, that only through the improving of technology will have a better world, a better air, less pollution. Even artificial trees may be in the next future. Because, it's the easiest way, maybe for us, to continue a kind of development of trend. But I think they are in the right position now to understand that we have to dismiss this attitude, to understand that we have to learn from other conditions. The scarcity of resource, yes, scarcity of resource is a general problem all over the world. In some parts of the world we pretend we do not have, but for instance now we understand that our development after the pandemic, our economy is somehow made very difficult because of the lack of some resource, which are some kind of materials, some kind of minerals that comes from China or other countries. So in a different degree, in every part of the world, there is this problem of the lack of resources. So I think that the times are ripe to understand that we have to completely revolve our attitude. So.
Yes, I agree with you, but also, it's not only like that you have to look at other countries. Our own elite has to look at our own traditions, because somehow all of us who've been trained abroad, and especially in the West, think that everything that was old is to be dismissed. There's not something that we can learn from. And the same is true for vernacular heritage also. When I was practicing as an architect, I never thought I'd learn anything from what people did, and now I know that there's so much there. There's so much creativity. So we have to, I think, now become a little bit humble about, what we might be able to learn.
Right.
And be able to, see what was there before and how we can learn from it. I'm not saying that everything will be applicable, but there's a lot that could be applicable.
Yes.
So really now I say traditional urbanism is really eco-urbanism. And that's where we have to go to eco-urbanism in all our cities, right? Yeah.
Maybe we still talk a little bit more on the question of the resources and which resources are being made available to certain contexts, etc. We were also discussing about this. You were saying charity is the wrong way. That's not the way to empower. That's not the way to change actually the systems, ecosystems as well. Could you please tell us a little bit more about your ideas on that?
Yeah, okay. That's my pet topic. I didn't touch it yesterday because I thought that was not the occasion. But in all these years that I've been working in the humanitarian field, I really feel a total disagreement with the UN system and a lot of INGOs who've been working in my country. There have been lots of disasters and a lot of money that's come in. I cannot tell you the amount of funding that we've received, but really nothing is sustainable because everything is just done up to the point and then it stops. Because everything is given out. I call it the colonial charity model, the Western charity model, because everybody feels bad when something happens in poor countries, and then they say, okay, just give them, and give them charity. So everything is given out as a handout. Now that is the worst thing you can do to anybody, because then you make them into supplicants. People don't feel that they are able to do anything themselves, and that is the killer for any kind of progress. And so, and I don't believe in what they have this, what they call they're all silos, okay? They have a cluster system where one agency will only deal with housing, like UN Habitat, or UNICEF will only deal in water, and so on and so forth. And everybody goes and does something in one village, the other one goes into another village. There's not an integrated model, with the result that money that comes in, I think it's just misuse. It's not that people want it. I mean, everybody does it with their best of intentions. But I think the system is wrong. And I think the more we can give people the capacity to do it themselves, by training. Through training is the best way. And I found that in my country particularly, everybody, and women also, are really keen to learn, because it is, finally, people want to have dignity in their lives. They don't want to be treated as something that is, dismiss them as nothing. So dignity is something that we have, and you can provide dignity through architecture. And not by giving handouts, by training people to be able to do something better. If somehow all the money, and you of course are very much involved, both of you in that SDG, how do you reach the Sustainable Development Goals? But I believe that the way things are going, we'll never be able to reach them by 2030 or whatever it is, because so much money is needed, and more so now with the COVID-19. I mean, in my country, 200 million and more, 100 million are below the poverty line, let alone being poor. How will you reach them? And this is not Pakistan, this is the whole of South Asia, the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa. So we have to change the way we invest. We have to change the way we want the things to happen. We've got to make people responsible, treat them as partners, get them to do things, because they do a lot of things themselves. Use the local material. That's why locally sourced materials are so important, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be earth and lime and bamboo. It could be anything that's around them, so that the cost is less, embodied energy is less, and so on. So lots of solutions that you can actually apply just by training people and letting them do it themselves. And I wish that all these aid agencies, and it's really taxpayers' money, you guys are all paying for it, and why are you paying this money? I don't know, I don't understand. Because it's going into the pockets of politicians and others, it's not going to the people. So the more we go into training, tell people how they can do it better. So can you imagine, I've got in my province alone, something like 12 lakhs is 1.2 million families that are today homeless, okay? Every time a disaster comes, everything is gone. Now, if you could just get to them, teach them how to build a better home, then you won't have that problem of investing into them, or they won't have a problem of trying to find money. There are lots of solutions. If we think deeply, it can be done. And then whatever money there is, I can tell you, will be more than enough, and it will be sustainable. as long as you don't treat it as charity.
Yes, you know, Yasmeen, what you were talking, I was thinking that, I completely agree with your position that we have to see in a different way, to conceive in a different way the same concept of investment. Now, one of the main features of the investment as we in Western countries conceive it is that, there is a relation in time. I invest money, I have to get back money, the result of the investment in a certain time, which is typical of capitalism, even in the act of building city. We have a very clear example here in Milano. If you want to build a skyscraper or a new part of the city, it will take 3 years maybe, but no more than that, because otherwise it's not worth the investment. So this means that maybe we have to reconsider the concept of time in itself, to slow down our, all our efforts, and we have to think, okay, I'm investing in training, as you say, but I do not care as much about the time to be quick. It takes time. It will take the right times, because we are speaking of human capital and not just financial capital. So each one of the people for where we invest will respond in its own sensitive way. So this means, yes, reconsidering also the act of time and to slow down the architecture, the culture of architecture. We have been too fast, maybe, in those last decades.
Maybe it is not only architecture, it's the entire
Yes,
investment system that has to get
course.
slowed down. So we are fighting against the giants,
Yeah.
if we
Of
can
course.
call it that
Of
way.
course.
Yes.
So in that sense, I'm looking at our young colleagues, our students. It's a lot of challenge which is ahead of us all, and of course for you mostly. And I'm wondering if you would like to make a contribution. Do you have any questions? I'd like to open the floor for our guests in the room. Or comments that you would like to say, something, please.
Even criticism.
Yes,
We will
yes, your
accept even
comments,
that.
your comments.
It's your future.
It is your future, more than ours. Your experience.
Little microphone for us to see.
No, I actually want to thank you for having you here, because it's a really incredible experience. And I think the discussion brought up a very interesting point, which is richness. So richness and a transversal project of architecture, which takes into account different instances. So both social, environmental, economic, and so on. So it is a way of conceiving a sort of holistic project. And it is, sorry, I'm really happy to be here. So what I wanted to ask you is related to the idea of creating co-creative processes with the community. I think it's an actual way of evolving architecture, but I was wondering how it is to set up this kind of process, and which were the most difficult part of it. Because I think it's a way of, let's say, integrating different competencies and knowledges. And I think it's not always easy to do that. So I wanted to ask you if you could explain a bit more of the difficulties of the process.
Well, that's a very good question, I have to say, because really, as architects, or when we are studying, we're not trained to deal with community at all, actually. We're trained to deal with clients. How do you make presentations to impress them? And then we learn all those good things, but we are never able to really communicate with any kind of community or go and work with them or be with them even. So it takes a little bit of an effort, and you have to, it was difficult for me also in the beginning, But because I'm as alien to them as you might be if you went from Italy to a village in Swat, for instance, you know. So it was tough, but somehow if they start believing in you, then the whole thing just opened up for you. And because I have worked a lot with women, so it was easier for me than my men folks together, you know, because we were able to get to women who were never first consulted ever about what their needs were or what they wanted. So if you're able to zoom in and understand the needs of the community, then they'll be with you with no time. And I think you can, with your eye, particularly as a trained architect and a built environment specialist, you'll be able to see where the deficits are. Where are the problems where you can help them? And if you start helping them with those little things, your reputation will grow and they will have confidence in you. Then you can just, you know, be with them and do things for them. There's just so much to be done. There's just everything is wrong there, you know. There's nothing that they have. So there's plenty of work, I can assure you, if you want to start on that. But you have to take the first effort. It's going to be tough. It won't be easy, but it can be done, right?
Thank you.
I also would like to thank you again for all your precious words in these days. We're hearing from yesterday, and we will hear also in the next days. I was also wondering about your process in the form finding, about the structure you create, because like they are very almost prefabricated models, and they are very simple frames, but I guess there is a lot of work in defining the process to build them and to replicate it in a bigger scale. So how was it for you? How you came up with this idea of a prefabricated bamboo structure, for example, as we saw with the student?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a long journey for me as well, right? It wasn't easy. But first of all, I really have to thank you for the book, actually, before I forget. I think it's amazing what you all have done, because even I did not remember so many things that you have put in, and it must have been a very hard task to find, because I've never really tried to compile or put together anything of my old stuff. I mean, after 2000, I just thought I'd forget about all that. So it's very difficult to get hold of anything. So it's really remarkable, because everything is there. My latest stuff is also there. So thank you so much for that. I'm just so grateful. It's amazing work, actually. And also, I think the fact that you put together that structure, the prefab one, it took a long time to understand what was needed, and it just happened that we started to work with bamboo in 2009, when there was I had to go and work in a camp where there was a military action, and people had to be brought in because there was going to be army action in Swat. And I just went there to see what I could do, and I'd never used bamboo. I had total disdain for bamboo, like any architect. I thought it was nothing to really be sort of used. And then I found there was nothing else available, so I thought, okay, the bamboo is there, let me use it. And that's how I began to use it, and found it was so amazing. So first, of course, it was, it's all a matter of evolving things. I went through a lot of phases of doing things, and then I had to design something for this earthquake in 2015. So I thought, how do I transport everything there, and how will we do it? Because the tents were not working, it was very cold, and we needed an alternative. So that's how it came about. A lot of time, things have come out because of necessity, because I felt that I had to do something in that area. And whenever there's an earthquake, and depending on the materials that are available, so somewhere what we've done is, which I did not show yesterday, but we've got some things tested on a shaking table, and like my masonry structure, which has this bamboo infill, and kind of, we call it the jali, which is like a web that you put in, and that it was tested for Kobe earthquake, which was I think 7.3 Richter scale. And they could not break it up to 275% of Kobe earthquake, and then it went up to 670%. And the concrete buildings around the university were beginning to be affected, so they stopped. But this is what can happen with materials like that, which we don't even know the potential, So more research, more work on this, whatever is available, I think is the way to go now. And I find that the prefab stuff works very well, because you can do it under controlled conditions, so it can be strong, and nobody can mess with it. In my country, you have to be very careful. Sometimes people, when they do things, they forget or they deliberately don't use the materials they should. But this one has, the quality control is inbuilt. And then we tell people also how to check everything. So once it's delivered and they see it, they have to make sure that all that we wanted is there. And so that is the best mechanism for actually checking. So, but as you work, you learn, and you just have to keep on learning more. I learn all the time. I mean, I was talking about this floating building because just this a few months ago, somebody said, we have this water that comes in, and then the buildings that are, that get either washed away or whatever, and then it recedes. Every year this happens. So then I thought I'll design a floating structure. So I have a floating structure now which can go up and down with the level of the flood. So you just learn to just carry on experimenting and doing more. And the more architects are involved in this, the more solutions we'll find. That's the whole thing. We need architects to be there to do these things also. Otherwise, we are leaving everybody to their fate, and it's not fair, I think, when we have all the capability with the architects, right? Yeah, so. Right.
Thank you so much.
Hello, first of all, thank you for coming and thank you for the talk. It's really brought up a lot of questions I have been thinking about in my own time too.
Yeah.
So the big question in my head right now is, so in my prior experience, before starting my studies, I worked a little bit in mainstream construction, and also I'm really passionate about earth, so earth buildings. I'm from Turkey, and so I tried looking for projects of just building with cob, building with earth bag construction, but a lot of these projects I found are very expensive compared to just building with concrete. So actually, in villages, people only the rich could afford to build a nice a eco project and just a eco village. And it was sort of people were priced out of sustainable materials because it was much cheaper to buy bags of concrete and and it's much cheaper to get the labor for that and build. So my question is how to make sustainable materials like bamboo, earth, lime, whatever, make it accessible, because there's also a lot of bureaucratic barriers in front of it. In my experience in the US, I noticed that a lot, it's just very limited, rigid what you can build and what you can't, and natural materials are not really accepted in a mainstream way, so there's also that barrier. So when these two are combined, it just, so far I've been noticing it's these projects, at least where I have observed in the world, are very niche and available to only to the wealthy in some ways. So do you have any insight about that? Because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I am really confused, and I get a little bit desperate. So yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. The way the conditions are today, because there's not enough research on sustainable materials that are around all of us, and there's very strong lobbies, as we were discussing this morning, who do not wish to provide any materials except, where they are making their money. So this is a big issue. It's like a chicken and egg situation. What comes first? Unless the industry begins to realize that they are inflicting this great damage to the environment, to the detriment of all humanity, it's not only people who live there, but everywhere else, we will not get the kind of research that we need, which is really essential if you want to use alternative materials. That's what we're talking about, because if you want to start using alternative materials, they're far too expensive because either the transportation cost is high or whatever. So I cannot advise you for your country, but certainly I found that in Pakistan, because I use earth is available everywhere in plenty, but people don't know really the potential of earth. So if we tell them what is the good one they can use and how they can use it, and a lot of times earth was not acceptable because it would disintegrate when there was rain. But by again, our Marcus Vitruvius, because of lime, by using lime to stabilize earth, you get a product which is far superior to concrete, because you get, once it's stabilized, then it can deflect any kind of water seepage or whatever. Lime I've found to be an amazing material, and you should start using that because that's available here. I don't think there's any dearth of lime here. You use it in conservation. You have got the best lime stucco work in Italy, so it's here. But nobody's taught. We don't learn about lime because cement lobbies are so strong. We always taught about cement. So you can start with materials that might be available and then see how you can expand your palette or your repertoire of things, But it will be hard work. I'm not telling you that it'll be easy. It won't be easy. But I think the potential is huge once we start working on it, and the universities will be the cradle for all this. They are the ones where you can have research, we can experiment with materials. Today, if the 3D printer can do it with clay, I never imagined it could do it with clay. But you've got it, Yeah, you guys have done it. The chula is made out of, the 3D printing is done out of clay. Who would have thought that? So it's a matter of really just experimenting and doing more of it. But the more people are thinking about this, the more likelihood there is. So it's going to be difficult for you in the next years, but all of you have to work hard. Then you will get a better future, right?
First of all, it is a real pleasure to be here, and also it was a real pleasure to take part in the workshop for about 1 or 2 months. I don't know if I'm speaking on behalf of all the students here or all the students in this university, but on behalf of myself, I never can imagine myself, I don't want to imagine myself going on the same standard path that I think most of the students that are graduating are going to. So we most likely go to a company and start sitting on a desk, working with computer, doing models, and in reality, on that position, I don't see myself making a real contribution to the world or to the people, and personally, I don't like to go through that path. So I'm asking if you can give us some suggestions that how we can get more into what you have done and what you are doing, so getting in touch with real people, with real communities, and making sustainable architecture, but in a right way, as you are doing, how we can get a start in this path.
Well, do you want to respond to it? I can too, if you like.
No. Well, you first, please.
Yeah, listen, your life is going to be very tough, because there are really lots of challenges. And I was very lucky. I'd done all that I needed to do, and then I could have the luxury of just retiring and not going back to it, I was just very lucky. And really, it's the earthquakes that opened my eyes to what was happening around me. When you're an architect working in the big companies and with multinationals and all the rest of it, you're like in a cocoon. You don't know what's happening around. You don't really care also. So obviously you're sensitive. Obviously you guys now, are thinking about it as to what the future should be for all of us. It's not only for yourself. And I'm just thinking, I don't know whether it's possible, but you could start with disasters, because when the disaster happens, then they'll need a lot of help everywhere in the world. And if somehow universities such as this one could really have a platform through which you could come in and contribute in some way whenever disaster happens, and say to aid-giving agencies that you are prepared to do this, and the work could be done or could be guided from here, that could be one way of just getting involved in this kind of thing. Because now disasters are going to happen everywhere, all over the world. And that's the best way for architects to now step in, because you can really contribute. So is there something that you think can be done? You tell me whether it's possible. Do you think there can be a group of yours now that you know of alternative ways of doing, whether you can form a group and say, okay, let's prepare, maybe for an earthquake or a flood, or, what do we do? Ilaria, what do you think? Ilaria is going to say something.
You have each other too. Don't forget that. I mean, the greatest thing about architectural education is you work as groups. This is an incredible potential, this kind of networking, knowing each other. The voice, architects need voice, and just one voice is not enough. You're an exception. You have dedicated yourself for this cause. Of course, you can go this way too, but you can also stick to each other. And the schools should enable this kind of being as well. You have much more flexible minds than the older generations, and the courage. The more mistake and the more one is makes and the more one is part of the system, less agile and less courageous you become. So it is a lot about your future careers, in how much you want to become part of the establishment and be, subject to the client's wish, versus how much you are as a community of architects enabling yourselves and empowering yourselves in terms of reaching out further and therefore becoming more stronger. So I think this is a big challenge, and we have to really take this very serious in architecture education as well, because we are, as educators and institutions, what are we giving to you? It's not only the hard facts and how to know the materials, function, etc. It's also your social strengths that you have to develop much further. I think we need that if we want to have really, as you said, humble but ecological and socially robust future in our planet. No?
I think Lari, or maybe say.
Yes, I agree completely with Zoya. I think that now, hoping that we finally escape from COVID, we have to go back working a lot on the site. So because here we could acquire competencies, skills, and so on. But we have to merge training, as Yasmeen explained it before, and education, and working with people on the site. That is possible to be done in weak territories, in weak situations, but also in our cities, I think. We were talking about that with Fulvio when he arrives, about this building by Gioponti, and he said, but what we are doing in our school, we have conservation studios, courses, history courses of architecture, and then some ones that probably has studied some years ago in the school could do a modification so strong and so bad of a building by Gioponti. And so it is a problem. We have to, I think, improve responsibility. The idea that if you become an architect, you have to work for the community, for the cities, for the people. And it's a sort of, you are a civil servant in a certain sense. And that's very important. And this is a work for our schools. And we could try, we have the possibility to travel now, to stay with people in different contexts. We have in our school more than 30 different nationalities of students. You could also, I think, try to compose groups, international small groups of students, and try to visit the country of your colleague and doing things, and try to find a way to make a different type of profession. We have to make a strong innovation. You will have to make a strong innovation. From our parties, we can just support you to do that. So I want really to thank a lot Yasmeen, our new graduate
so
for her contribution to our school during those days.
Thank you.
And Oya, Atalay, and Fulvirace, and all of you for this talk. And now maybe it's time to close. Thank you.